Season 1 of Sister Wives aired in 2010. Truly Brown had not yet been born. She would not arrive for another 3 years. And yet, every single behavioral pattern that would eventually define Kody Brown's failure as her father was already fully visible, fully formed, and fully documented on camera in those first 8 episodes. The seeds of Truly's abandoned childhood were planted before she existed. The audience watched them being planted. Nobody knew what they were watching. Until right now. If this is your first time on this channel, hit like and subscribe right now, because what we do here is different. We go back, we go deep, and we show you things that have been sitting in plain sight for over a decade. Let's begin. Here is the thing about Season 1 Kody Brown that people forget, or maybe never fully registered, because what came later made it easy to rewrite the beginning. Season 1 Kody was not a joke. He was not obviously failing. He was not the man you would look at and immediately think that person is going to become a cautionary tale. He was charismatic. He was articulate in a way that caught you off guard. He had a genuine ability to make plural marriage sound not just defensible, but almost philosophically coherent. He made the audience curious enough to keep watching, which is not a small thing. Curiosity is hard to manufacture. He was real. He spoke about his family with a kind of ownership that, in those early episodes, read as pride. He used the word love constantly, and it did not sound hollow. Yet, he talked about his wives as individuals, their personalities, their quirks, their roles, and he seemed to know them. He seemed present. He seemed, in the specific language of that era of reality television, like someone genuinely trying to show the world something true about his life. That is what makes the behavioral analysis that follows so important to understand correctly. This is not about a man who is always obviously broken. This is not about spotting a villain in his origin story. This is about something far more uncomfortable. A man whose specific patterns were present from the very beginning, whose particular way of moving through relationships was fully formed before the cameras even arrived, and whose trajectory was, in the most precise and painful sense of that word, predictable. If you knew what you were looking at, we are going to learn what to look at. Start with this. Watch Season 1 with one specific question in your mind. What does Kody do when an individual needs conflict with his vision of the family? Not when a crisis hits. Not when something dramatic happens. Watch the small moments. Watch the conversations where one of the wives raises something personal, something specific to her, something that belongs to her individual experience inside this marriage, and track what happens next. What you will see consistently from the very first episodes is a particular sequence. The individual concern is acknowledged. It is heard, or appears to be heard. Then it is gently, almost imperceptibly reframed. The personal becomes collective. The specific dissolves into the general. The wife's individual concern gets absorbed into the larger story of the family. A story that Kody is always, in every version of this sequence, the author of. And then there is a resolution that feels like closure, but functionally is not, because the original concern about the specific, individual thing the wife actually raised has been replaced by a different conversation entirely, one that ends where Kody needs it to end. This is not a villain's move. That is critical to understand. Watching it in Season 1, it does not read as manipulation. It reads as a man managing complexity. It reads as someone trying to hold together a complicated family structure that genuinely requires a kind of constant diplomatic labor. You can watch it and think, that is hard. That is a lot to navigate. You can feel sympathetic. But here is what that pattern, applied to a child over 13 years, without correction, without anyone ever successfully challenging it, produces. You produce a child whose individual needs are consistently acknowledged, reframed as family concerns, and resolved in favor of the collective narrative, which is to say, resolved in favor of not being addressed at all. You produce a child who learns, slowly and then all at once, that her specific self does not register, that she is legible to her father only as a part of something larger, never as herself. You produce Truly Brown. The pattern was in Season 1. The outcome was in the pattern. Nobody decoded it in time. Now, let's talk about the most expensive statement Kody Brown made in Season 1, because it was not dramatic. It was not a fight. It did not make the highlight reels. It was something he said quietly, with complete apparent sincerity, in a way that the cameras captured almost incidentally. He said he loved all his children the same. He said it without hesitation. He said it the way people say things they have never had any reason to examine, because the belief has never been challenged, because the challenge has never arrived, because the distance between the belief and the reality has not yet become visible. He believed it. That is not a defense of what follows. It is actually the explanation of what follows. Because a man who sincerely believes he loves all his children equally never develops the practice of examining whether he loves each child specifically. Equal love and specific love are not the same thing. A child does not need to be loved equally among siblings. A child needs to be loved specifically to be seen in their particular personality, their specific fears, their individual way of moving through the world. To be known, to be held in someone's mind as themselves, not as a position in a family structure. Kody Brown's sincere belief in his own equal love protected him, across 16 seasons, from ever developing the habit of specific love, because he already believed he had it. The work of specific love, the daily, effortful, individualized work of knowing a child, never became urgent to him. He had already answered the question, truly needed him to ask it again, differently, repeatedly. She needed a father who was curious about her specifically. And the man who said he loved all his children the same in season 1 had already, without knowing it, closed the door on the kind of curiosity she needed. The belief protected him from the work. And the work was the whole thing. There is a conversation in season 1 between Kody and Christine that, if you go back and watch it tonight, knowing everything that follows in this family's story, will physically stop you. You will pause the video. You will sit with it for a moment, because it is not a dramatic conversation. It is not a blow-up. It is one of those quiet scenes that reality television produces constantly, and audiences absorb without registering, because nothing appears to be happening. Christine raises something specific, a concern about her place in the family structure, something personal and real and hers. And Kody responds. He listens. He philosophizes. He talks about the family's larger purpose, the spiritual framework of what they are building together. He reassures her. The conversation ends. Christine is not comforted. You can see it if you know how to look. There is a specific quality to the way someone looks when they have been talked to rather than heard, when the conversation has technically addressed their concern while functionally doing nothing with it. Christine has that look. The conversation is over. Nothing has changed. That specific, identifiable sequence of Christine raising something real, Kody engaging with it philosophically, and Christine absorbing the non-resolution while appearing to accept it, will repeat. It will repeat in season 4, and season 8, and season 12, and then in the seasons where they are talking specifically about Truly, about her needs, about what she requires from her father that she is not receiving. The conversation will have the same structure. It will have the same outcome. Christine will be unheard. Kody will be satisfied. And a little girl who cannot yet speak for herself will accumulate the cost of every unresolved version of that conversation, season after season, without anyone ever successfully breaking the pattern. The playbook was written in season 1, in a quiet conversation that nobody remembers. It never changed. Now, here's the piece of this analysis that nobody, and I mean nobody in the extended conversation about this family, has examined through the specific lens it requires. When Robin Brown joined the family in season 1, the existing family did not simply expand. It was reorganized. Every adult in that family, Kody, Mary, Janelle, Christine, redirected significant emotional energy toward managing that integration. That is not a criticism of Robin. That is what happens when a family expands, particularly in a plural marriage structure, where each new addition requires relational renegotiation at every level. The wives had to find their new positions relative to each other and relative to Kody. Kody had to distribute attention across a reconfigured family. The relational labor required to absorb a new marriage is enormous. Every adult was doing it. That redirection of adult emotional energy away from the existing family's rhythms, away from children's needs, and toward the management of adult relational complexity was still happening when Truly was born in 2011. She entered a family that was already reorganizing. She arrived in the aftermath of that first season's restructuring. She was not born into a stable, resourced family waiting to receive her. She was born into a family whose adults were already running a relational deficit, already stretched, already managing more complexity than the structure could comfortably hold. This is documented in blended family research, with a consistency that is not even particularly contested in the literature. Emotional resources in a family are not infinite. When significant adult energy is redirected toward relational management, children, particularly younger children, who cannot advocate for themselves, absorb the deficit. They do not receive less love in any absolute sense. They receive less bandwidth, less presence, less of the specific, attentive, available kind of parenting that a child requires to feel genuinely held. Truly Brown was born into a bandwidth deficit that was structural before it was personal. Before Kody had made a single specific choice about his relationship with her, the architecture of the family she entered had already shaped what was available to her. Season 1 built that architecture. Season 1 determined those conditions. And nobody, watching it at the time, understood that a child not yet born was already being shaped by what they were watching. Let's talk about what a documentary actually is. Because SisterWives was sold to its audience as a documentary, a window. An honest, unmediated look at a family choosing a different way of living and loving. That was the contract. That was what TLC offered, and what the audience accepted, and what the Brown family presumably agreed to when they opened their doors and their lives to cameras that would follow them for nearly 2 decades. A documentary that captures the seeds of a child's suffering. And those seeds are in Season 1. We have established this. We are going to keep establishing it carries a specific weight. It is not neutral footage. It is evidence. And what the SisterWives archive represents, when you examine it through the lens of what eventually happened to Truly Brown, is one of the most complete behavioral records of a family failure that exists anywhere in the reality television genre. Every pattern, every conversation, every moment where a different choice could have been made and was not. It is all there. 18 seasons of it, beginning in Season 1. The cameras saw it. The producers saw it. The editors shaped it into episodes. The network aired it. Season after season, the footage accumulated. And at no point, not once, in any episode, in any season, did anyone in that production apparatus pause and say, "This pattern, if it continues, will cost a child something she cannot recover easily." That conversation never happened. Or if it happened, it did not change anything. That is not a small thing. That is a fundamental question about what it means to document a family. If your documentation is comprehensive enough to capture the behavioral seeds of a child's eventual suffering, and you continue documenting without ever interrupting, without ever asking the question the footage demands, then what have you made? You have made an extraordinary historical record. And you have also made something that the child at the center of it will one day have to sit with, in ways that none of the adults who made it will ever fully reckon with. Truly Brown did not consent to being documented. She was born into documentation. She grew up inside it. Every painful moment, every invisible birthday, every season where her father's camera-facing attention did not translate into actual presence, all of it exists in an archive that is publicly available, permanently accessible, and entirely outside her control. SisterWives told us it was a love story. It was also, without anyone intending it, the most detailed possible record of what it looks like when a child falls through the gaps of a family's carefully constructed public narrative. The cameras got everything, and the getting of everything is both the record's value and its cruelty. Here is what the rewatch community figured out before most professional television critics did. And this matters, because the SisterWives fandom, the long-term, detail-oriented, genuinely analytical portion of it, has done something extraordinary with 18 seasons of material. They went back. They applied current knowledge to early footage. They asked the question that the original broadcast never prompted. What does this look like if you already know how it ends? The answer, for Season 1 specifically, has been remarkably consistent across forums, across Reddit threads, across YouTube comment sections and fan communities that have no connection to each other. People who independently rewatched Season 1 after the divorces, after Christine's departure, after Truly's story became visible, they are identifying the same moments, the same behavioral patterns, the same conversations where something real was raised and something hollow was returned. The consistency is not coincidental. It is what happens when a large number of careful observers are given the same dataset and the same analytical frame. What they are finding is this. Kody Brown in Season 1 is already operating from a specific emotional architecture that does not have room in it for sustained, specific attention to any individual who is not either directly challenging him or directly affirming him. The wives who got his attention in Season 1 were the ones in conflict with him or the ones in alliance with him. The quiet ones, the ones who were neither threatening nor validating, the ones who simply existed in the family without generating relational friction, are already fading into the background of his attention in those early episodes. You can see it if you are looking for it. The camera catches it because the camera catches everything. Now apply that to a child. Apply that to a child who is by definition unable to generate the kind of relational friction that commands adult attention. Apply that to a small girl who is not in conflict with her father, not capable of mounting the kind of sustained, articulate challenge that might have broken through his pattern, not yet old enough to understand that her invisibility is not her fault. A child in that family, with that father, in that structure, was always going to need an adult in her corner who could advocate for her specific visibility, with a persistence and a force that would not be deflected by philosophy. That adult was Christine. And the rewatch community has also identified with the same consistency how Christine's capacity to advocate for Truly was systematically eroded across the seasons, beginning in Season 1. Beginning with the pattern we already described, the individual needs to be raised. The philosophical deflection, the hollow resolution. Christine's advocacy for Truly did not fail because Christine failed. It failed because the architecture of her marriage made sustained, successful advocacy structurally impossible. Every win was temporary. Every conversation reset. Every season she had to begin again from the beginning. And across 16 seasons of beginning again, Christine's emotional resources, the ones she needed to keep fighting for her daughter, were depleted by the same family structure that was simultaneously depleting Truly. The rewatch community sees this now. Laid out across 18 seasons, it is undeniable. In Season 1, it was invisible because nobody was looking for it. But it was there. Every piece of it was there. There is a specific thing that happens to children who grow up in families where the adults around them are managing significant relational complexity. It is documented. It is consistent. And it is important to name it correctly, because the wrong framing leads to the wrong conclusions. These children do not always present as obviously struggling. They are often described as easy, self-sufficient, independent for their age. The adults around them notice the independence and interpret it as a positive trait. Look how capable she is. Look how well she handles things. She has always been like that. What the adults are frequently missing is that independence is adaptive, not innate. The child learned to be self-sufficient because the alternative, dependence on adults whose attention and energy were already fully committed elsewhere, was not reliable enough to build a life on. Truly Brown, across the seasons she appears in, is described in exactly these terms. Easy, bright, capable. She does not generate the relational friction that commands attention. She moves through the family structure with a kind of quiet self-containment that the adults around her interpret as her personality, rather than as her survival strategy. And because she is not generating friction, she does not receive the attention that friction would have produced. She is invisible in the specific way that adaptive children are invisible, by being too good at managing without what they needed. This is the cruelest version of a family failure. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that is obvious in real time, the kind where a child's specific coping strategy, her intelligence, her adaptability, her ability to function without what she requires, becomes the mechanism of her own continued neglect. She was easy to miss because she was so good at being easy. And she was so good at being easy because she had already learned, at an age too young to articulate it, that being easy was the most reliable strategy available to her. Season 1 built the family that taught her that. Season 1 contains the adults whose relational patterns would, over the following decade, make that lesson inescapable. The cameras were there. The lesson was already being written. Now, let's talk about where this leads. Because this analysis is not an endpoint. It is a foundation. Truly Brown is going to grow up. She is growing up right now in real time, outside the frame of a show that no longer exists in the form that documented her childhood. She is going to have access, when she is ready for it, to 18 seasons of footage that shows her the family she grew up inside from angles she could not have seen while she was living in it. She will be able to watch Season 1. She will be able to watch the year before she was born, the conversations, the patterns, the specific behavioral architecture that was already in place before she arrived. That experience watching yourself predicted by footage that predates your existence is not something any framework fully prepares a person for. She will see the patterns that made her childhood structurally inevitable. She will see her father in the first flush of a charisma and conviction that had already, in ways nobody recognized, foreclosed the kind of relationship she needed from him. She will see her mother raising concerns that never landed. She will see Robin's arrival reorganizing the family's emotional resources in ways that shaped the conditions she was born into. She will see, laid out across 18 seasons of documented evidence, that what happened to her was not random. It was not bad luck. It was not a product of circumstances nobody could have controlled. It was patterned. It was structural. It was, given who her father already was before she arrived, genuinely predictable if anyone had known how to read the signs. That knowledge arriving fully formed, backed by 18 seasons of footage she can pause and rewind and examine from every angle, will do two things. It will break something in her. It will break the part that spent years wondering if she was the variable. The part that asked, the way children always ask, whether different behavior on her part might have produced a different outcome. Whether she had somehow been insufficient, whether the love she needed was available somewhere in that family structure and she had simply failed to locate it. The footage will end that question permanently, because the footage will show her that the outcome was already determined before she drew a single breath, before she was capable of being sufficient or insufficient, before she had any behavior at all. The structure was already in place. The patterns were already running. She entered a story that was already written, and what happened to her was a consequence of that story's architecture, not a consequence of anything about her. That understanding will break the question, and breaking that question will free her, not from grief. Grief is not something that gets avoided by understanding. It is something that becomes navigable when you know its actual shape, but free from the specific, corrosive uncertainty that haunts children of these families for decades when the record is incomplete. Truly Brown's record is not incomplete. It is 18 seasons long. It is extraordinarily detailed. It is, in this specific and painful sense, a gift, because she will never have to wonder. She will be able to know, completely. Finally, forever. There is one more thing to say before we close this out. And it is the thing that this entire series has been building toward. In a way, I want to acknowledge directly. The SisterWives audience has watched this family for 18 seasons. A significant portion of that audience, the people in this community, the people who have stayed, who have rewatched, who have analyzed and discussed and argued and theorized, stayed because something in this story felt unresolved. Not just dramatically, morally. Something in the story of this family, particularly in the story of the children who grew up inside it, felt like it had not been properly seen, properly named, given the weight it deserved. The fandom's analytical work, the rewatch threads, the behavioral timelines, the careful, detailed examination of who said what in which season and what it meant in retrospect is not idle entertainment. It is a form of witnessing. It is a community of people saying, this child's story will not disappear into the archive. We will keep looking at it. We will keep naming what we see. We will refuse to let the production narrative, the narrative the show itself constructed, be the only narrative that exists about what happened here. That work matters. I want to say it clearly. The people doing it are not conspiracy theorists. They are not obsessives without proportion. They are pattern recognizers with an 18-season dataset and the moral seriousness to apply it carefully. And what they are finding, consistently, when they apply that dataset to the question of Truly Brown, is that the show contained everything needed to understand her story from the very beginning. The evidence was never hidden. It was broadcast, in prime time, for 18 seasons. We just needed to learn how to read it. This is what I want you to do tonight. Go back to Season 1, Episode 1. Just the first episode. Watch it knowing everything you now know. Watch it with the specific frame we have built together in this video watch for how individual needs get absorbed into collective narratives. Watch for the equal love claim and what it costs. Watch for what Christine's face does when a conversation ends without her concern being genuinely addressed. Watch for the emotional reorganization that begins the moment Robin enters the frame. And then come to the comments section and tell me what you saw. Tell me the specific moment that hit you differently. Tell me the line you had to rewind. Tell me the expression you caught on someone's face that you know you missed the first time because you did not yet have the context to read it. Tell me what the footage contains that you were not equipped to see before tonight. I will read every single response in this comment section. I will pin the most precise, most insightful observations, the ones that add something to the analysis, that extend it, that catch something I did not catch, because this community's analytical work deserves to be visible. You are not just an audience. You are the people keeping this record honest, and that is not a small thing. Like this video if it changed how you see Season 1. Subscribe to this channel if you want to keep doing this kind of work together, because what we do here is not surface-level recap. It is the deeper examination that this family's story, and particularly Truly's story, actually deserves. And get ready, because Topic 20 is coming, and I have been building toward it across every single video in this series. It is the most complete, most carefully constructed, most unflinching examination of Truly Brown's full story that exists anywhere on this platform. It takes everything we have established, every behavioral pattern, every structural analysis, every piece of evidence the archive contains, and assembles it into the clearest, most complete picture of what happened to this child, and what it means, and what comes next for her. It is the video I have been working towards since this series began. It is the one that closes the loop on everything we have opened. It lands next. And when it does, nothing about this family's story will look the same as it did before you watched it. I will see you there.